Welcome everybody to this meeting or webinar from the National Consortium for Societal Resilience. My name is Duncan Shaw, and I just want to briefly introduce the Consortium. For those of you who this might be the first meeting that you've joined, the Consortium is relatively new, and as part of our activities, we're running a webinar series that aims to bring some of the really excellent practice that we've seen across the world into the Consortium, so that we can start to think about how other places do whole of society resilience, community resilience, societal resilience, and learn from those places, so that we can begin to have conversations within the Consortium as to what else has been going on. The Consortium is quite a broad-based consortium. We cover 36 of the 38 LRFs in England, all of Northern Ireland's EPGs, Scotland's RRPs, and 2 of Wales's 4 local resilience forums, as well as Jersey, Guernsey and the Isle of Man. We have a whole range of voluntary sector, business sector, government sector partners that help us to really understand whole of society resilience from a very broad perspective. The vision of the Consortium, whole of society resilience, looking at individuals, whether they are a single individual, whether it's a household, looking at community groups, businesses and organisations, and trying to understand the role that they can play in societal resilience and whole of society resilience. Just a shout out for the next webinar, not wanting to take away any of the glory from Canada's webinar today, but we'll be running a webinar on the 15th of December. And you're welcome to follow the other parts of the Consortium and the work that we're doing through the LinkedIn system that we have and the group if you're not an immediate part of the Consortium. So I'd just like to welcome and introduce Cindy and Paul from SARVAC. SARVAC, a really impressive voluntary organisation in Canada that's doing some amazing work, and I'm particularly grateful to them for coming along, given the current pressures that they must be under, given the floods, the landslides and all of the things that we've been seeing happening in certain parts of Canada at the moment. I'd like to start off by in structuring the chat function, so please I request for you to use the chat and to ask questions, to have a conversation whilst the presentation is happening and whilst the discussion is happening. And then Caroline's going to bring it all together for us to remind us as to what it is that we should be thinking about in the UK in the Consortium. And so that's the structure of today. Paul, Cindy, I wonder if you have some slides that you'd like to share, and if you would perhaps like to start sharing them.
Okay, just give me 1 sec.
So Cindy, Paul, I'd just like again to welcome you. Cindy, Executive Director of SARVAC. Paul, you've got some really interesting work around accreditation, around some of the curriculum work of SARVAC. And so together, I really look forward to hearing about what's been happening in SARVAC and lessons that we can bring across into the UK.
Okay, and I'll find my documents on here.
Well, thank you very much for having us, Duncan.
Yes.
It's the SARVAC is it's been an interesting ride for us in a lot of ways. Like everybody else, we've been experiencing the COVID here in Canada, and but the work continues on. We've been it hasn't really slowed us down in what we've been working on. But I'll just I'll let when we get our slides going here, we'll give you a little background as to Cindy will. Some of people may have joined us before on the first call that we did. Here we go.
Actually not, Paul. This is a completely different group of people.
Okay.
So a completely different group.
I did watch your Consortium, your YouTube you attached. That was yesterday. It was interesting. Yeah, so great. Okay, well, I'll let Cindy start off with a little bit of, I guess, with the history.
Yeah, so I'm the executive director for the Search Rescue Volunteer Association Canada. So I got to get to the next. We are, we know SARVAC, it's much easier acronym. So we are a nonprofit volunteer organization who provides support to the 265 ground search and rescue teams in Canada. There's 9,143 current volunteers. Everybody's volunteer, nobody's paid. To 13 provinces, the 10 provinces and the 3 territories, and that's how our board of directors are made up. Everything is fully volunteer, and so we're like the umbrella of ground search and rescue within Canada. We can self-deploy our volunteers if there's a SAR incident. Teams can self-deploy. We always fall under our authority having jurisdiction, which in most places it is the police who will actually call us out for activation, and basically that way then we're covered for liability insurance and workers' compensation, things like that. So there's MOUs in place for all provinces, territories, protecting volunteers when they go out. So our funding, we're actually greater than 95% federal government funding. So currently our contribution agreement is $714,000. We're in the second year of that agreement, of a 3-year agreement. It has its struggles. Having just all government contributions, there are 2 other volunteer organizations in Canada, the Coast Guard Auxiliary, Canadian Coast Guard Auxiliary. They are the volunteer sector of the Canadian Coast Guard, and the Civil Air Search and Rescue, CASARA, and they are actually the volunteer portion of the National Defence. Now, both of those organizations are funded through their federal partner, and they're not limited the way that we are. So it is a struggle. $714,000 a year is with salaries, and we have a huge insurance bill and different initiatives that we work on. So we make it work with that money. So, but we have to renegotiate again in the next after next year. So we do receive some private memorial donations, and we do charge a nominal membership fee to the provincial territory associations, which in reality it's $100 a year is all we charge to basically to have them as of our association. SARVAC and all the 13 associations have access to a SARNIF program, which is a new initiatives fund, which you have to apply for the funding. It's never guaranteed, and applications are done annually. And actually, the deadline for 22-23 NIFs is actually on next Tuesday, the 30th of November. The federal government will put out priorities for the applications, and so everything has to suit around that, and then they all go to a NIF merit board and are all reviewed and graded, and then based on that they'll look at how much money is there to fund, and whatever rate's the highest is how it gets funded. Last year they put in a new stipulation that they've opened the program to for-profit companies, which has actually made it a little bit of a struggle for the volunteer community, because us representing volunteers, we do have associations and teams who can't access the funds because they're falling too low on the merit list. So that's a challenge for us. I'm going to let Paul talk now all about the training. because it's to do with the accreditation, certification, and things like that. So, Paul?
So yeah, so search and rescue volunteers here in Canada are they do lost and missing persons stuff for the police. That was sort of the premises. That's how it started. It was search and rescue. They do technical now. It's advanced in a great many different profiles. Search and rescue volunteers. They do everything from high angle rescue, helicopter rescue now to cave rescue. These specialty dogs. It's really expanded and become very, very professional. And with that comes with the training. The majority of the training does occur in-house by the teams themselves, and has historically. People have brought skills. External training is brought in. The big thing with external training, it's costly. And remember, these are all volunteers, and some of them are, or most, I should say, most of them are in very rural areas of Canada. So access to external training is not great. So as Cindy talked about, the new initiatives, funding from the federal government, if applications are made, training, sometimes it's facilitated out of that. A province or a territory may get us some money to kick off some training. So a little bit of a background on the history of we had standards. Every province and territory in Canada had developed over the years training standards, which were basically sharing information and knowing what the work is. The standards were very similar in all provinces and territories, but we didn't have a national standard. We didn't have anything that would facilitate or be the benchmark for Canada. So SARVAC in 2012 came up with the idea that it would be nice to amalgamate all the standards in Canada and bring make it one bunch of standards based on core competencies, basic core competencies. So that was a huge endeavor, and it was the basic stuff. It wasn't the high angle or the specialty training I'm talking about. This is the basic core competencies that a searcher or a team leader or a search manager would be required. That whole process was a long journey. It was started in 2012. Actually, it was talked about before that, but the actual work began in 2012. And SARVAC had brought in the Canadian Standards Association to do the facilitation of the development of those standards, doing gap analysis on all the existing standards in Canada, and then bringing them together and looking at the core competencies that would be pretty much the same everywhere, recognizing that there are regional differences. Obviously, in this country, we have everything from the high Arctic, to the Rocky Mountains in the west and the coasts of the Atlantic Ocean, Pacific Ocean. A lot of ground to cover. So the standards were started. That whole idea was started in 2012. There was a technical committee formed by all search and rescue specialists that they could put together. The CSA brought together into that as a group of people. It was from the Canadian Armed Forces, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, other large provincial police departments, and ground search and rescue experts, national parks. Anybody that was involved in search and rescue in any way, shape, or form was brought together as a technical committee to build and to work on establish basic core competencies. So that was completed 2015. The other thing we realized, we talked about training. We have all these rural teams in these rural areas that we're attempting to train, and we're training. Some people, obviously maybe came from educational backgrounds and were able to train, and a lot of people weren't. So the first standard was done on the basic core competencies for the country. Then we decided that we would make training curriculum standard through the CSA as well, and that standard was a basic outline of what, or a guide, you would say, for people in the field to build curriculums based on the standards. Everything is based now on the standards. So we had the core competencies to work with, and something like map and compass, for instance, in that standard, if you see that standard, it's all the things that you would require, all the basic core competencies that you require to become a proficient in the use of map and compass or GPS or something like that. So the training curriculum was the second standard that was developed, and that standard is built as a guide to provide people who've not built curriculums or have not set up training in any way, shape, or form at the ground level, at the very basic level, to be able to do that. So both of those standards were established and were put out there and recognized in 2015. I think I can pretty confidently say we were the first country in the world to have national volunteer ground search and rescue standards at that level. I know there's, obviously there's specialty standards that are used, in mountain rescue that obviously started in Europe and places like that. But so that was something that has happened. We also looked at in that time of building those standards, we looked at volunteers for ground search and rescue, motivations, the demographics. Things were changing here. There was the old school and there was sort of the new school coming in, and we had to consider, not forgetting the old school, but for looking at the future and recruitment and retaining search and rescue volunteers. So we found out, and we learned very quickly that the newer generation, or the people entering search and rescue these days, they like a good format. They like structure to the training. They like the idea of there being standards. We were kind of wondering how that would be accepted, but we know now that that is so, and people really like that structure to build on, and gives them those set those objectives or those goals in training, and it also helps, it's having the basic standards, identifying the things that are required for safety, and that was a big part, safety for the volunteer. Our objective obviously is to rescue or save people, but also we have, the consideration is in the sheer fact that we have all these volunteers and things that they need to consider to operate, everything from clothing, mental health, all kinds of facets of training, or things that are required in the field, use of equipment, as I mentioned before. SARVAC also in that time started out with the standards and did that, but and those standards are out there now. They've been accepted by the provinces. They were rolled out nationally. They were endorsed by the Public Safety Canada. It was built, that was built with their assistance, and also with the association. SARVAC has a board of representation from the association for every province and territory in Canada, and they were a big part of endorsing that as well. It's been out now for 5 years. It's still being rolled out in a lot of ways as training changes. The standards themselves are every 5 years under the program of the Canadian Standards Association, are required to be affirmed again every 5 years. There's a call for change on the standards. Changes can be made at any time. Any member, they go out for public consultation. The public, anybody in Canada, has an opportunity to comment on the standards. They're put out at 60 days, and every time we make a change, that goes out to public consultation as well. So we get some, you can get some feedback or some things from other people that aren't maybe even involved but have an understanding of SAR. So the other part of it that was considered at that time was, and as we rolled it out, the volunteers themselves in the field were asking us, about say, well, I'm a trainer now and I've been designated as a trainer for my team and things like that, and what about certification and accreditation? So we didn't have a national accreditation certification program for volunteers in Canada. provinces and territories, some were doing their own certification, some weren't. So this whole idea of, so we did a study, a 2-year study where we put another advisory committee together to look at accreditation and certification model for Canada for ground search and rescue volunteers. And again, that was a 3-year process to put that together. Again, bringing together professionals, educators, people not necessarily associated with search and rescue, but who had built programs, and again, facilitated by the CSA. And out of that, we came up with a model for accreditation certification. This year, we've launched a pilot project on that model to build a national certification program, starting with certification at the field level, at the provincial territorial level. Provinces and territories will be responsible for their own certification, and then we want to have a national certification where we would be able to build a databases and having people recognized as certified that could be deployed in other areas. For instance, last week we had a major flooding in province of British Columbia, and the province went into a state of emergency. There was a call out to the search and rescue volunteers to respond. They did it within that province, but there was also a call nationally by Public Safety Canada for us to be ready. But currently we have all the volunteers that would go, but we don't really have a database of any kind recognizing or showing exactly what volunteers are trained to, and the logistics of moving those people around. So we've started now a 3-year pilot. At the end of 3 years, I'm pretty confident that we will have a national accreditation program where a searcher or volunteer in the field or in the province, at the provincial territorial level, they can stay at that province and territorial level, or they can make an application through SARVAC. SARVAC will be the accrediting certification body to be certified nationally. That means just to be recognized nationally. And that format and that accreditation certification program comes with requirements and guidelines that, again, the CSA have developed for us. We've worked very closely with them. They've been very, very helpful. They've been with us now for 6-7 years, I think, or longer. They really understand the volunteer program and what SARVAC is attempting to do. So they've been very helpful. So that's where we are right now. We've just started the pilot. Just started this 2021. We will attempt to work with the provinces and territories through the individual associations, like Cindy had mentioned, and with the AHJs, the authorities having jurisdiction, to solidify that program at the provincial territorial level, and then also have them feed into our national model, where we can do response or do assistance. Humanitarian, SARVAC is very involved with the humanitarian program, which is being put forward by Public Safety Canada, that is a result of COVID. They are looking at the Red Cross is involved, SARVAC has been involved, and who is the third one, Cindy? I believe it's
well, St. John Ambulance and the Salvation Army. Salvation Army.
So those volunteer organizations have been asked by the Public Safety Canada to start to work. They're going to be working together and look at humanitarian. So we're talking about more natural resource or natural disasters.
Yeah.
And in the past, historically, ground search and rescue volunteers, their focus was lost and missing persons and search and rescue in urban and wilderness areas. And now through climate change and all these things that have happened, COVID, we're understanding we have a huge wildfire. British Columbia that had the flooding this week also experienced massive wildfires, as you probably heard this year. And we're having a lot of tornadoes. Things are that climate. Literally, the climate has changed. So search and rescue volunteers now are being, and they have responded to those in the past, you know, within their provinces and their territories with wildfire and tornadoes and things. But now it's going to be, there's going to be an attempt to make it more organized, more formatted. And with that comes the training, more core competencies required, a database where we can actually access people and things like that. So I see a question here, you know, factors engaging. Getting volunteers motivated, or we ask that question, what motivates people to be engaged in this? And there's many different reasons. It's a community level. In Canada, we have we've only got I think 40 million people in this country, and the communities are very small. Resilience within those communities is always dependent on volunteers, whether it be volunteer fire departments, ground search and rescue, the Red Cross. So it's not a new concept to any of our rural communities. And when bad things happen in those communities, so people a lot of people just out of a sense of helping their community step up. Some people, you know, have personal reasons for joining ground search and rescue. I don't think you can really nail it down as to why people, you know, people have had incidents where family members have been involved, you know, been victims or whatever. They've stepped forward now and become members, and some of them have been members for many years. So that's basically what encourages people. There's many reasons. People just like to help people, and it's simple as that. And it's what you do when you live in a rural area. You come out and do the best you can. And organizations like the Red Cross are really embedded in a lot of those communities. And like I said, so have the search and rescue volunteers. They're the go-to people. So anyway, I'll let Cindy talk a bit about some of the benefits. There are benefits to being a ground search and rescue volunteer. Not only do you get great training and you get to meet some great people, I'll let Cindy talk about these other things that we're.
Yeah. So over the past few years, we've been working on different programs, you know, to help give back to the volunteers. I mean, we represent them, and, you know, they need to feel appreciated, and they need to feel protected as well. So about 3 years ago, I think 3 years ago, we actually started funding an accidental death and dismemberment and a directors and officers insurance policies for all the GSAR volunteers and all the teams throughout the country. So, you know, that's a little bit of a protection there for them. And I mean, in the future, we will be expanding that insurance coverage as well. We're looking into plans for that now. And we also have a cyber policy as well. So right now, the cyber world is it's becoming frightening because you know, we had our own hospital had a cyber attack a few weeks ago, and I don't know, it'll probably take them a year or more to get back what was lost, and at least that protection is there for everybody. We lobbied for a few years with the federal government, and we were awarded a $3,000 federal search and rescue volunteer tax credit. And basically, to be eligible for that, a SAR volunteer needs to provide a minimum of 200 volunteer hours per year, and in either eligible services, and eligible search and rescue services would be meetings, trainings, and searches. And then they would also have to provide other services such as, you know, community work. We do fundraising, we do prevention programs, things like that. So right now in Canada, the federal tax credit, it comes out to be $450 refund on people's tax returns every year. So people are doing the work anyway, so now they're receiving the benefit, you know, they're receiving some federal recognition for that. And a lot of the provinces have also jumped onto this program as well, and some are actually matching that credit. So it helps because volunteers, they have to provide their own gear or things like that. So at least whatever we can do to help offset costs to them, and their appreciators appreciate that. So we also have a service award program for 25-year plus members. We have actually wooden plaques done up with their awards, all engraved, you know, wooden plaque, things like that. And then they receive 25 up to 60 years. So we have people 60 years who are active members, and you know, to get a national award, it means a lot to some of them. And with the curriculum, the core competency and the curriculum standards, basically, at least now we have a baseline of where training should be around the country, and it helps all the teams and even all the volunteers know their level of training, where it is, what it needs to be, things like that. So yeah. And we offer also a community website, a training community website, which is a big, you know, it's through the CSA. We can log in through there, have questions, any documents, things like that, anything to do with training. That's a good portal for our volunteers, and they all make use of that. And, you know, and then we also have an e-learning program for Basic Searcher. We will be making a few adjustments to that program soon because of the certification project. Basically, we're not going to reinvent the wheel on some of that, because we can go in and adjust some of the exam questions, things like that. And at least then you still go to the same portal, and if you pass your exam there, at least then it's the next step for getting your certification as being, you know, being as a certified searcher. So it's something that we're trying to get rolled out to benefit all the volunteers. Something else that SARVAC provides is the Adventure Smart program. We were been involved with Adventure Smart program since 2008. And the federal government has asked us, what they did ask us probably after a couple of years, to help bring it national. And so it's basically a prevention program that you can go to adventuresmart.ca. That's the website. And we're encouraging people to go outdoors, but get informed before you go. There's 5 targeted programs. It's the Hug a Tree and Survive, the Survive Outside program, Snow Safety, Survive Outside Snowmobile, and a Paddle Smart program. And all those programs are online, and they all have a lot of information through the Adventure Smart website, you know, tips, things like that. And as well, on the website, we have a web-based trip plan, as well as we actually have a mobile trip plan app as well. And people are really using those because you can send your message out. I'm going here, I'm going, and I'll be back at this time. And if you don't show up, your emergency contact will receive an email or a text basically saying they haven't showed up on time, and you know, appropriate action can be taken. So it is helping save lives, just, you know, using your phone. We also have an interactive kids game, and we're doing e-learning programs as well. Right now we're working on a communications and big communications piece for Adventure Smart, and with that will be the outline of all the e-learning, and that will be training for individuals and for like master trainers as well. So to show how much the volunteers, you know, provide this prevention plan. So over the last 5 years, volunteers have provided 5,610 presentations to 237,449 members of the public, and this contributes 31,532 volunteer hours. And a volunteer hour is based on $25 an hour. So that alone is basically free prevention programming worth $788,000 Canadian, or 464,000 pounds. So it's a huge program, and it is growing. But if you save one life with the program, it's well worth. Yeah. So that's basically what we do in a nutshell. It is a lot. We do. I know Duncan's always amazed because we only have 3 full-time permanent employees. We do have 4 or 5 part-times, and they could be just project-based, and some are short-term, some are, maybe a couple of years, things like that. But they are basically project-based there. So, but yeah, so that's SARVAC in a nutshell.
Yeah, I'll come in. There's some questions in the chat that was wondering just from Sunday, so an opportunity maybe to ask some questions around the so-called core competencies, the training of volunteers, and particularly retention. Do you find the training program and structure approach helps to retain the motivation of those volunteers?
Sure. Yes, I can speak to that. I think that it has, for sure. Yes, it has. The core competencies again is raised the bar. It's made it more professional, and again, going back to that, some of the research we did about volunteers, not just search and rescue volunteers, but what volunteers, there's a younger generation of people that do like it more structured, and the core competencies are proven core competencies. They're developed by professional people. They so when you come into the organization, if you're off the street and you're just joining a ground search and rescue team, I know, I'm talking 30-35 years ago, there was all kinds of skills, but there was really no benchmark or structured layout of your training. So this is provided. This allows for a training scheduling, training curriculums to be developed. Sort of like I said, it's a roadmap. It allows people know very much when you join as a searcher that over a period of time, you are going to learn these core competencies, and they like that. It very much raises the bar. Initially it wasn't, and we found that like to write a test or do an exam, this generation, the newer people, that doesn't intimidate them all. They like the challenge. So I believe it does benefit retention for sure. It just shows it's more professional.
Okay, Paul.
I'd just like to point out as well that those standards and curriculum are available for download on the sarvac.ca website. I think right on the front page, you can go to the curriculum. It'll bring you in, and they're in PDF format in English and French. So they're open. Anybody can print. They're probably 100 pages each, but print, download, however, but they're there for public use.
Yeah.
Okay, and what ages or what age ranges do you accept when it comes to their program? Is another question that was asked for.
So for search and rescue volunteers?
Yes, I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, it's age 18. So it's 18 and up. In Canada, for insurance, for liability risk management, they require 18. So there are some teams that do take like junior searchers, but they don't go out on search. I think it's more for training. they can take those, but they have to have letters from parents, things like that, and basically they'll never be called until they reach age of majority. So.
Okay. And another question then was regarding the so-called rural groups and difference between the rural and the urban, obviously the city and the more dispersed regions of Canada. Is there a noticeable difference then in the training and expectation and motivation to raise funds between the city versus the urban or the country?
There's obviously in the urban groups and rural groups, they are different. They actually, the methods of searching, the types of calls that they're getting are different. They're obviously some search and rescue teams in small areas, struggle just to get numbers. You find it obviously in the larger centers around the cities and in urban areas. The search and rescue teams they're a little bit, they benefit from, there's people there with more technical skills. There's computer people that are big on, all our search and rescue programs are run on our search mapping. All that is all GIS, geographical information system based. It's technical, so they have more access to people that are at that, like that kind of things. They have people. It's amazing the different backgrounds that people come with to do search and rescue. And obviously, the closer you are to an urban area, the more access you have to. There's people that love to do, the mapping. There's people who, there's more access to first aid training. There's more access to all kinds of things. There's more retired people, it seems, or whatever, or come and find it. But and searching in those areas, the principles of search and rescue are pretty much the same. But again, there's more opportunity. Obviously, there's for walkaways. There's those kinds of calls as opposed to somebody being lost in the wilderness in rural areas, which is often more likely the case. So it's more fast tracked. There's a definite difference, but the principles of search and rescue and the ability, and the core competencies, to be a searcher in a city, just because you're in a city, and we all know there's big urban parks, and those kinds and hazardous areas around lots of cities, and therefore all those capabilities and core competencies are still required. All the stuff I talked about before, about the safety for the volunteer, and then the specialty stuff is all there too. Cindy lives in St. John's, Newfoundland, which is, the city is built around an incredible trail and a rocky cliffed, very, very challenging area, with the Atlantic Ocean right there. And, so right there in your backyard, you have a city, you have that urban thing, but you also have that, you'll have something there on your doorstep minutes away that the people in the Rocky Mountains would be facing absolutely the same type of challenges with high angle rescue, helicopter rescue, weather, incredible weather playing. So yeah, it can be a mixture, but like I said, principles are the same, more access to more people, but in rural areas, there's more of a challenge to find. All volunteer organizations, I think, are struggling in small rural areas, and our rural areas are declining in numbers. More people are obviously, we're a big country. We're geographically challenged. We always say, with a large amount of distances for response to even help each other. Different teams, it can be 2 or 3 hour flight with an aircraft or longer. And so it's quite a different game, Hope that answers that.
Thanks, Paul. I'm just scrolling through some of the comments in the chat as well. Caroline's posted a comment saying Adventure Smart's a great idea, and it has been adapted for UK as well, and it's apparently been very well received. Another question that's come up from Stuart is around the idea of mission creep. Do you see at a local, at an operational level, do you see much in the way of mission creep from what you maybe expect from the ground search and rescue teams, or is it quite well managed and controlled, and if so, how?
In what way do you mean mission creep? Explain that to me.
So do any of your teams get asked to deploy or support operations which might normally be out with their normal scope of practice, I feel like?
Well, that's, yeah, it's going, okay, yes, okay. Yeah, that's starting to happen more and more.
Yeah.
As I guess we talked about the changes to the moving towards that humanitarian, the natural disaster response. It has occurred in the past, just because there were a group of volunteer people that were there, and in rural areas, you know, if there was flooding or there was wildfire, they helped with evacuation, did that. But it seems to be with the number of events changing, obviously the numbers are going up in the types of response, and they're being asked, yeah, and also to share resources just to meet operational periods. You know, to the sheer number of maybe bringing 4 or 5 teams together to cover you know, operational periods, which are usually, you know, 12 hours or something like that. So traveling outside their communities to help other communities do things with natural disasters, yes, that's occurring. And also the sheer fact that it requires multiple team responses to just get things done. That's a given.
Oh.
There's a question there. I see employers allowing people to have time off. That's a challenge. I think in smaller communities and places that it probably happens. I don't think there is no policy that I know of. Maybe Cindy does around that.
No, it's on a case by case, and
Yeah.
it depends on your employer. A lot of government employees, they basically have no issues of being let go to respond to SAR. And I think it depends on the situation as well. Like if it's an evidence search versus, you know, a lost child, you know, an employer is more likely to let their employee go to respond to that. I mean, that's, you know, that's critical, and this is what they're trained to do. So, you know, and people, I mean, there's a lot of volunteers who they use all their vacation time up just so that they can respond. It means every situation is different. So yeah.
Yeah, the commitment's amazing.
Yeah.
What people will do to be available, and then, like you said, to run these operational periods. That's where we get into this whole fact of, and it all goes back to accreditation, certification, and the core competencies. When you start moving people from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, there becomes this, you know, moving from one province to another province. You know, the compensation, the liability, the understanding that the requesting province or territory bringing in a resource from another province, you know, their police authority wants to know that the resources they're getting meet those core competencies. And right now we can't really show that. So I think this accreditation certification goes back into that idea of showing that everybody's trained the same, doesn't matter where they are. And if we do a multi-team response, whether it be between provinces or just even between counties, to make those, you know, to meet the needs of, you know, so people can go home after a 12-hour period, so we can't tie people up. To have that certification, accreditation in place, and to have those registrations in place, and then ask people if they can deploy for certain periods of time, not just say, well, could you come and we'll work it out from there. If there can be a deployment time, you know, we use you for one operational period. Say, I can come for one, but I can't come for two. That's an incredible help to the search, to managers, and the planning of the and, you know, responding to that event. We can get 25 people tonight. Tomorrow morning we'll have, or in the middle of the night, we're going to get 30 more. But we know that 15 of these people we have tonight are going home for sure. You know, they have to go. So challenging sometimes.
Yeah, I'll just come in. This is Damien again. I'll just come in, Paul. One probably final question, see in the chat, we'll just try and sum it up, is regarding the core competency framework, okay, for the search and rescue community. Was it difficult to try and embed that framework within that culture and acceptance? And was there any resistance to the program?
Yeah, well, I was tasked by SARVAC was my first. I'm a project-based person, and SARVAC had employed me in the very first 3 years to do that rollout. And I'll tell you, I was skeptical because it was the core companies were brand new, and we're talking to a community that's been around for a long time, and changes. So we actually we looked at that. We looked at change a little bit, like how are people affected by change, and we looked at all those kinds of factors before we went out there and started talking to people and just saying, well, here it is. These are new core competencies. You basically got to just suck it up and get on with it. We understood that there were going to be people who were going to find it very challenging to make that change. And so we went at it in a very educated format where we did meet. So we set it up. So we met with in each province and territory in Canada, myself and another individual. We traveled to and we developed a presentation. We talked about leadership skills. We did all kinds of things, but we met with the training community first. We asked each province and territory to bring their training community. So we would meet with maybe 15, 20, 25 people per session in each province and introduce the standards in that forum. And yeah, there were some people who were really not going to accept it, and some people, I heard people say in the country, well, maybe it's time for me to move on. It's getting a little bit too technical for me or whatever. But I'd say 98, 99% of the people welcome the core competencies. Well, this is great. Not really sure how it works yet, but we're really glad to have it. And the big sell was for us that we pushed it, that this is a national program. This wasn't, and it brought the unity, of the SAR volunteers together, whether you're in Newfoundland or whether you're in British Columbia or in the Yukon, the Arctic or wherever. These were going to be a national core competencies that you've identified. And the other thing was that we had to let them understand that they own those standards. SARVAC, organized it together, but the standards belong to the search and rescue volunteers of Canada, and and every volunteer in this country has an opportunity to speak to them, to make change within them. They're live documents, and they are voluntary. The provinces and the territories, but they're replacing with something that wasn't there before nationally. Was people like that nationalism. I think that was a big sell as well. They felt more of a part of a larger program that they didn't know about. So definitely, some challenges, but at the end of it, we were very happy with and it's still going on because we get new people coming into the organization all the time. So we're, the idea of introducing standards to them is it's ongoing. They'll never end, and we just have to keep building on them.
Well, thanks everybody for putting questions in the chat, and thanks again Cindy and Paul for taking the time to answer those. I'm going to hand over to Caroline now to do a bit of a summary and roundup of the session. So thanks very much.
Thanks, James. And I think another thank you to Cindy and Paul for that presentation, which was fascinating and has covered a huge amount of ground. So I think I'm really grateful now that a lot of it feels like home territory to me. I think my introduction to the world of local resilience forums and major incidents was through my involvement as a mountain rescue volunteer in Cumbria. And I think it sounds like there's a lot of stuff that we've got in common in the UK with the way you're set up in Canada. I think structurally, a lot of that sounds very familiar. So in the UK, we've got a number of national associations depending on which part of the UK and whether it's mountains or lowland, but largely set up in the same way with independent local teams. And that dynamic you've just described, Paul, where you're having to give those local volunteers buy-in to what the decisions made nationally are if you're going to get them accepted. So similarly to you guys, I think we've got some core training perhaps not in the same formal competencies that you do at the moment. And one of those that has always amused me is Mountain Rescue's England and Wales training package that is known as the Party Leader. I've always felt it never quite lives up to its name when we discover it's actually the Hill Party or the Search Party. But yeah, very similar, and very similar in terms of bringing in specialist trainers for helicopter skills or technical rope work. So I think some differences too. I think the recruitment and retention of volunteers possibly isn't so much of a problem for us, but I suspect that depends which part of the UK you look at. And we certainly don't have the tax credit scheme at the moment, which is something we may be pitching to government. I think that sounds like a real potential win. And then I guess my summing up is what's the relevance of this to the National Consortium for Societal Resilience? I suspect, again, similar to Canada, most of our search and rescue organisations in the UK have a really good relationship with their local tasking authority, which again is usually our local police force. I think that the challenge is whether there is a role and whether there's an appetite to use those search and rescue organisations in wider resilience work. I think in Cumbria, Mountain Rescue has a really good relationship with the local resilience forum because we've had a number of incidents. We've had big flood incidents. We've had to use mutual aid from other areas. But I know in other parts of the country, local SAR organisations have really struggled to develop that relationship with the local resilience forums. So whilst I could go on about that for ages and quiz you with lots more questions, it's definitely getting towards tea time in the UK. So I will hand you back to Duncan to do the final rounding off. And thank you once again.
Thank you.
So I have the easy task of just doing another round of thanks, really. You know, Damien and James, thanks very much for bringing together all the questions. I think it's never easy to do this remotely. It's much easier to do it in the same room. Caroline, for pulling together all of the very interesting parts of the presentation and contextualising that back into the UK. Cindy Paul, you've made us think as to what else can we bring? What other good practices can we see from other places and start bringing those practices into the UK? Last time we heard from CERT in USA, and the next presentation that we have is from New Zealand. So they're going to come and talk about some of the work that's been happening in Wellington around the community hub model. This is a model perhaps similar to what we've got running in some parts of the UK, and we're going to be listening a little bit more about how they have what they have done during COVID, what they have done during resilience building activities. So thank you very much, Cindy Paul, for your time today. Thank you all the attendees.
You're welcome.
It's been another great webinar, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next one. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks, Cindy.
You have a good day.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks all.
Everybody.